This podcast is the design of City Sites Urban Media, and our goal is to bring into focus the difference between culture and God's ideas found in His Word. To learn more, go to citysitesurbanmedia.com.
Take them or leave them, but by 2020, the Millennials will make up a third of all adults in the United States. You may be familiar with their other labels like Gen Y, Gen Me, the Boomerang Generation, countless others. But basically, they are the people born between the early 80s and the 2000s. Right now, that makes them between the ages of 15 and 34. The Brookings Institution estimates that by 2025, they will make up 75% of the workforce. Their influence is already changing the landscape of the political and business world. What are millennials known for, though? Their defining characteristics, according to the White House, are exposure to the internet during formative years, more education and racial diversity than ever before, and unfortunately coming of age during a recession. They're also labeled narcissistic and lazy by other sources, although this is disputed. The Pew Research Center notes that millennials are overwhelmingly liberal. They generally support gay marriage, abortion rights, and are not religious. They hail from incredibly diverse backgrounds and are burdened with large student debt. Higher levels of unemployment have also plagued them worse than previous generations.
Amy, it says you are trained in technology. That's very good. Are you adept at Excel?
No.
PowerPoint?
No.
Publisher?
Not really.
Exactly in what area of technology are you proficient?
Snapchat, Pinterest, Instagram, Vine, Twitter. You know, the big ones.
I'm surprised you didn't say Facebook.
That's for old people, like my parents.
This is the City Sites Podcast with Larry Kutzler.
Zach Windahl is a young man whose passion for life is evident by just watching him. He is not following a traditional career path for his life, but is finding great satisfaction in helping people know more about who they are through his branding business and his product development consulting. He is also an author who is helping people grow. Zach Windahl is a millennial, and that's why I wanted to talk to him here on City Sites Podcast today. Zach, you're a millennial, right?
Yes.
And what do you think of yourself?
Yes, I think I'm great. Of course I do. I'm a millennial.
Of course you do. And what do you think of your generation?
I think we are the most advanced generation that we've seen in a while because of technology and because of the things that we've produced. I think we are a passionate generation. I think we are a loving generation, a kind generation, and very different and very misunderstood from many generations in the past.
Well, you're much more tolerant, right? You will accept people at face value, more or less,
For
right?
sure, 100%.
Yeah, my generation, we have a lot of judgmental things that we have to kind of jump over in order to accept people today, but you do accept people very easily. However, you've had a bad rap as well, right? What have you heard?
That we are lazy, we don't do anything, we're messy, we don't get the job done, we don't want to work, you know, all that stuff, that we're the baby generation.
Well, there probably is some that are that way, but you
For
can't
sure.
categorize everyone in the millennial age group that way, right?
Agreed, completely.
Have you had any employers, present or past, that have had some issues with the millennial generation, either yourself or other co-workers? People treated you differently or expected things out of you that just really weren't in your menu of things?
You know, I haven't. All my work experience I've always had younger bosses and people that really understood me. So they might be 5 years older than me or so. So it's never been an issue for the way that we do things, because obviously, as you know, a lot of millennials like to work differently than older generations do.
And it's really a different time frame as well, right? I mean, even now, you can work from home in your present job, and you can work it anywhere in the country.
Totally.
Right? I mean, my generation never had that opportunity.
Right, which is one of the most important things for us, I think, is good benefits, being able to work from wherever. And I know so many companies over the last year or so have been really adopting to that, where you might only work from the office a few days a week because it is possible to work anywhere and you don't need the office space for them.
So how has the church related to you? Have they been embracing of the millennial generation? Are they suspect of you folks?
You know, that's funny because there is such like a decline in church attendance from a general perspective, but then you have these younger millennial churches that are thriving all across the world. You have Hillsong, you have VOO, Zoe, Transformation, and then you also have organizations like YWAM that are sending out younger people all over the world. Some things that are important to me in church, I think, are very different from what the older generation may care about. So for me, some of the most important things are amazing worship, as crazy as it sounds, but the graphics that the church puts together, their social media presence, having a relevant sermon that ties in pop culture and things that we're actually dealing with, a lot of less formality, less commitment, more opportunities to get into community and serve with no strings attached. I think developing the culture is the most important thing that a church can do, and it's also one of the hardest things that a church can do. But I know that older generations don't necessarily care about those things as much.
In our generation is a very truth-seeking generation. We want truth to be sort of at front and center. Is that as important to millennials as it is boomers?
I don't know if you can generalize that for an entire generation, but I think we want to know the facts in most cases and then make an educated decision from there.
So once you know the fact, then do you Google it to make sure it's accurate?
Not necessarily. That's a funny part of it, because so often we'll base our decisions off of people's character, based off of what our friends say, and not necessarily about digging into the deep truth.
So it's kind of like if the tribe says that this is a good thing to believe in, you think most millennials will go along with it. Friendships, of course, are very important that way.
I would say so, yeah, which sounds crazy to the older generation, I'm sure, but we are very much focused on, we live a life based on groupthink and what our friends say. And if everybody's in it together, then it's a good thing.
But that's an interesting concept, because you are an author. Mm-hmm. You have written the Bible study, and the Bible study is for a millennial age group.
Yeah.
And so when you wrote that, did you write it in groupthink, or how did you go about doing that?
So honestly, it's not necessarily written for millennials. I think the content works for anybody. So I took my parents through it and it works great for them. The design and the layout and the way that I market it is definitely towards millennials, because I know that it'll expand that way, because we're so focused on being able to share on social media and with social media ads. That's been a huge part of just getting it out there, and making it a shareable product was really important from the beginning.
So who's buying it? All ages?
It is all ages that are buying it. I'd say that our main focus is early 20-somethings when it comes to the design and the social media ads that we put out, because I think if you pick a specific demographic and you market to them and your ads are very relevant to them, it'll also hit everybody else that is surrounded by them. If we market our videos right now to a 22-year-old female that shops at Urban Outfitters and she has white walls and plants in her room, if we pick that person, it'll also hit her boyfriend, it'll hit her friends, it'll hit her parents, it'll hit her mentors, and everybody that surrounds them.
See, that's why I think older generations is scared of you. Because you got this thing all figured out.
Yeah, because we've seen what works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
And everything is out there. It's so crazy just how everything is out there now because of social media, because of the internet, that we just know so much more. In the past, you would have specific people that knew certain things, but you couldn't get their knowledge from just going on Google.
Well, you know, in the book of Daniel, it talks about in the last days that travel will increase and so will knowledge. And, you know, when you think about it, all of that has come to pass, especially the knowledge that's at your fingertips with Google and all the other search engines. So Tell me, Zach, you're an author of the Bible Study, which is a study from Genesis to Revelation, correct?
Yep.
Why another Bible study? For heaven's sakes, there's Bible studies galore.
Right.
So what makes this so different, and why did you do it?
So this Bible study, it goes through every single book of the Bible over the course of a year, and there aren't really any studies like that. Yes, you have individual studies on individual books of the Bible, but there isn't any that covers the entire thing. And there aren't any Bible studies that look great, that are designed really well. So I designed the Bible study so that it's more of a coffee table book, so that it looks good at the same time. Whereas with so many studies, they aren't designed to be visually appealing. This one, I wanted people to pick it up and to look through it and to enjoy flipping through it. Instead of, with a lot of studies, you'll just throw them away afterwards. This one you will hold on to for 10 years and use as a reference guide in the future.
When somebody picks up the Bible study, which it's called the Bible study, is it easy to read? I mean, what's unique about the format that seems to be appealing, especially to all ages?
For sure. So you go through 1 to 3 books per week, and you'll actually read the Bible at the same time as the study. So if we're studying Genesis, some weeks are quite a bit of work. Some weeks are a lot lighter. But if we're studying Genesis, you read the entire book of Genesis throughout the week, and then you'll go through the study, which is maybe 5 to 10 pages of questions and additional content. And it's very much open so that the reader can make their own decision on things. And I don't really share my own viewpoints at all, which is a very millennial thing, I think, but it lets the reader decide for themselves.
But how does a guy that's your age, a millennial, decide, I think I'm going to do a Bible study? I mean, why? What prompted you? I would think that if you had come out of an academic family background or your dad was a publisher or something, but this came out of the blue, didn't it?
Not necessarily. So I was living out in Australia, and I was studying the Bible very intensely for a year. We were studying 1 to 3 books a week. You'd go through every book 5 times, and afterwards I had all of this content. And then when I moved home, I actually taught a small group the exact same way that we did it, and I continued to study and study and study. And by the time I was done with that, I had like 20 pages of notes per book of the Bible, and I felt like I needed to do something with it.
Your YWAM experience then was really the genesis for this study.
100%. So I was in the YWAM School of Biblical Studies program, which is the advanced program, I guess, or it's not the basic one that most people talk about. And so the Bible study is pretty much laid out the same way as the School of Biblical Studies. But a lot of people aren't able to go to Australia or somewhere else for 9 months to study. Now they can do it at home.
So what kind of caught your eye, or what was the desire in your life at the time that made you go to Australia for 9 months? I mean, you're a young guy, you're starting your life, all of a sudden you're going to unplug for 9 months and go halfway around the world?
Right.
What happened?
I was 26 years old, and I hit a spot where a lot of things in my life were falling apart. And I had spent a ton of time working on some projects that just weren't happening the way that I wanted them to. And I knew a lot of Christians that I didn't like. And I knew I had an understanding of Jesus. I grew up in the church, but I'm looking at a lot of Christians and they were not living out the life that I knew Jesus to preach. And that drove me crazy. And so I hit a spot where I said, God, I'm going to give you 2 years, prove that you're real. Otherwise, I'm done, because I didn't want to be associated with them. I cared too much about my image. And so I moved out to Australia because I wanted to get away. I didn't want to be distracted here. I knew if I went to Montana or any of the other schools in the States, I would be too distracted because I'd be on the same time zone. So I moved to the other side of the world, to this little surf town, and you'd surf in the morning and you'd study for 12 hours a day, 6 days a week.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So as we look at the future, obviously you are very successful. The sales of the Bible study has done very well, right?
Yeah.
And you're in your 3rd or 4th printing already? Fifth printing. Holy
it's
cow.
Crazy.
It's amazing how time flies.
Right.
So people are enjoying it. You're selling more and more of these books. So what's the future hold for you?
We're actually in 32 countries in the world, and there's only 160 1969, I believe.
Wow.
Which is wild, and every single state in the U.S.
Isn't that incredible?
That's been amazing.
It has been amazing.
So for the future, I have a new project coming out next month. It's an online class looking at topics like joy and positivity and identity and blessings, all from a biblical perspective.
So people can start looking in their bookstores or online or on Amazon for the name Zach Windahl, correct?
You got it.
Did you ever think you'd ever be an author? I mean, was this ever a part of your earlier years thinking, yeah, someday I'm going to write books or write Bible studies?
Not at all. The funny thing is, I don't enjoy writing.
Really?
I don't at all. But I know that I'm gifted in certain areas. When I see a need, I fill that need no matter what it is. So if I need to figure out how to create the design files for the Bible study to send to a printer, I'm going to figure it out. YouTube University is the best thing that you can ever do. You can learn anything on it.
Yeah. Spoken like a true millennial,
Right.
That's for sure.
And so I did not see myself necessarily writing studies. I knew I was always going to have a place of influence, especially in more like self-improvement areas. So looking at positivity and joy and things like that, just because that's always been a part of who I am. Really focusing on those.
So if we were going to ask advice from you as far as how does, whether they're business leaders or church leaders, what's some of the advice you would give them to how to have a relationship with a millennial? I mean, a true relationship, not just something that's, going to patronize them or something. How do you have a true relationship that is meaningful? What's your advice?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think in business, is different than in life. So there's, like in Minneapolis, there's a company called Bridgeworks that actually goes into bigger companies and they will teach generations how to work with each other, which is amazing.
Great, Bridgeworks.
Yeah,
okay.
Really cool. So my friend owns it actually. And so they'll go in, they'll teach everybody in the company about each generation and what makes them tick and what makes them work better with each other.
Okay.
So for businesses, I think there's great books and things like that. When it comes to just life, I think millennials are open to understanding where the older generation is coming from, as long as the older generation is open to understanding where they're coming from.
So as long as they don't try to override their understanding or their purposes and so forth.
For sure. Don't put your beliefs on me. I'll figure out whether or not I want to believe it, but I'll listen to you because I think everybody has a right to voice their own opinion.
I think in the future, as millennials begin to take over more responsibility in terms of leadership of the country and politics and so forth, it'll be interesting how they will develop because of what you said earlier. They're more relational, they're more tolerant, they have a much easier demeanor to get along with, especially if you work on the same plane as they do.
For sure.
And the older people will be gone. So it'll be interesting to see what the future brings. Last but not least, Zach, what would you say to the millennial listening? What do you say about the spiritual life that's important? Because you've developed not only these study materials, but you've developed a relationship with the Lord that's very important to you. You said that earlier.
Yeah, for sure.
You got tired of seeing Christians living out a life that just didn't honor God or didn't honor the scriptures. What would you say to the millennial in terms of advice when it comes to the Lord?
I think Christianity has such a bad rep in so many different pockets of the world because there's so many people that call themselves Christians, but then act far different from how Jesus ever would. So instead of making their decision off of a real encounter with God, a lot of the time it's based off of someone else's actions in many cases. And so that's why I wrote the Bible study, because it's so important to have that foundation in your faith that can't be swayed by someone else.
If somebody wanted to learn more about the Bible study, where do they go?
tbsstudy.com. So there's 2 S's there. tbsstudy.com is our website where we do all of our sales from. It's also available on Amazon. And then on Instagram, on my social platforms under Zach Windahl, that's where I share a lot of what I'm working on, and you can stay up to date every single day.
Wow. And we can Google him even. Zach
can Google
Windahl.
me.
And what would happen if we Googled you?
I don't know. I don't Google myself often.
Hi, I'm a millennial, and I am a monster. No one really knows how or why I got this way. There's a lot of different theories, though, as to what could have gone so terribly, terribly wrong with me. It could be that when I was in preschool, I sang a lot of songs meant to build my self-esteem, and now that's why I'm an unrepentant narcissist with no sense of human empathy. That's one theory. It could be also the fact that I got some trophies for participation when I was in elementary school. Whatever is wrong with us, the main thing is that I get to talk about me. So that's good. So let's talk about who I, most importantly, but I guess the millennials in general are. What is a millennial? Who am I? There's some possible answers here. Am I A, a narcissistic jerk? B, a Facebook, social media, Tumblr, Twitter, self-branding man-child? C, someone who, quote, rejects the system and refuses to get a job but never refuses a handout from my parents? Or D, someone born between 1981 and the year 2000?
Thank you for joining us today. Every Friday, we bring you this podcast with interviews with people who are challenging the status quo of Christianity and challenging the cultural norms of our day. Please help us get the word out by sharing the link to this podcast with your online friends and family. Our website also contains other podcasters who are part of the City Sites network of communicators, all sharing the good news of Jesus Christ. Our website is citysitesurbanmedia.com.
This is the City Sites Podcast Network.